Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the film Weapons have a very, very good hold in its second weekend, dropping only 43%. Freakier Friday from Disney actually holding pretty well also, and the brand new film Nobody 2, which has gotten some good positive praise and word of mouth, but also some mixed reviews from fans of the original movie, not making that much money in its opening. And in fact, when compared to the original film that was released back in 2021, this film's actually, in many cases, doing worse, if not the exact same, which means it has not built its audience, and also means, oh boy, this was a very interesting drop by Universal, which for a film that really should have been a knock it out of the park experience because of how fun and how good that first movie was and how many people enjoyed that first movie. I will have to say I'm very surprised by just how bad these numbers are for Nobody 2. Now, it did have a very low budget of only about $25 million, which again, for films today is on the lower side of things. That being said, it is just not making that much money domestically or internationally, and if it does not have a excessively strong second weekend, I think that we'll probably end up having to project that the movie will not be able to make its money back theatrically. Again, story's not over for that movie because it is looking like it might, just because of its cost alone, be able to maybe make some of that back on VOD sales and Blu-ray and 4K sales, but as we all know, no studio really wants that to be the story. Every studio has expectations of what they think their films can do, and I think there was a lot higher expectations for this movie, especially since the first one was impacted by COVID. If you go back into the box office mojo numbers, for instance, they literally have the whole COVID label about it, trying to give those excuses and those reasons for why a film's numbers are the way that they are, or trying to, I guess, justify it in some way. So the fact that this which has absolutely no connection at all to COVID or has any excuses to anything really, to do this poorly, says a lot. And again, it is for a movie that overall I enjoyed, but the ending definitely goes off a bit too, let's just say, too on the nose for modern Hollywood in many respects, and also just in many ways doesn't really add a whole lot to the universe that I think was very well established in their first movie. And so we'll go ahead and talk about this. We'll also talk about the truth behind Superman, because 34% hold in weekend 6, very strong number. However, guess what? It went on a video on demand, even though the rumors that came out a couple weeks ago that it was going on video on demand, and everyone was trying to say, oh, those aren't true, and yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? Turns out it actually was true. Again, whether or not you want to believe that those rumors had actually legitimate sources, or that somehow, some way just happened to coincide perfectly with the actual release on VOD, again, to go ahead and say which one takes the least amount of assumptions and which one actually sounds the simplest to explain. And I would say it's probably, hey, maybe those rumors actually were right in the first place. Regardless, the fact that it was on VOD and still held 34%, again, that shows a lot to the fans of this movie, but it also reveals quite a bit about how the studio is viewing this movie, because anyone who's looking at this honestly will say, if your film was doing as well as many of the gun nuts, many of the big fans of this movie, right, those are two separate categories for me, but many of those people have been saying about how amazing this film is doing, if it was doing as amazing as you have claimed it to be, there is no way that any studio would have put it onto video on demand this early. You look to some of the most successful films of the last several years, and you know that they oftentimes will say, no, we're going to keep this thing in theaters as long as possible to try to get as much money as we can from this film, and then take advantage of video on demand and Blu-ray sales. When you release this early, kind of getting this out of the way early, when you release this early, you are saying, hey, we have not made our money back yet, which also helps to, again, confirm that part of the story, which some people, for some reason, cannot deny or cannot accept, even though the numbers are very clear that, hey, even using their budget that they have reported, which, again, I have issues with, but hey, I'll take that at face value, even with their reported budget, and assuming very low marketing costs for today's world, right? And not some of the larger numbers that are being thrown out there, but again, the most conservative estimates that we can take, this film is still $50 million in the red. When you have that into account, this move makes complete sense, because you say, yeah, they still need to make their money back, and they see the box office is slowing down. 34% hold is very good, but it's also about only $2.2 million domestically. You're not getting really much anything internationally anymore. You're slowing down so much, and they realize, hey, guess what? This film's not going to make its money back theatrically, so let's go ahead and put this on VOD, because then guess what we can do? Then, because it'll probably will have a lot of success on VOD because there's some hardcore fans of this film, and because eventually when you have those Blu-ray and 4K sales out there, guess what? In the next couple weeks, they'll be able to, and they likely are already preparing for those massive VOD numbers that they're going to put out there. They're just going to say it's the biggest that we've ever seen, even though they probably won't actually put actual metrics out there. They'll still put those things there to say nonetheless that this is the reason why it's a success. And so this is, again, kind of cover for them to say, oh, this film was always a big success, when the reality is that no, this film was still in the red, and it took a VOD release 35 days after your release, which is incredibly early, just to push this thing over the finish line. This is not the big win that many people are trying to push it to be. Again, I'm not saying this is the massive flop that maybe some of the other people out there are trying to say that it is, but to say that this film is a massive success. And the only argument that you might have is, well, look at how much better it's doing than Fantastic Four. It's like, okay, you're talking about a Fantastic Four film or a Thunderbolts film or a Captain America film, which are massive flops, and you're saying because this film has done about $100+ million more, that somehow makes this a massive success. Guess what? If you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars worth of flops, and then you're only about $100+ million better, doesn't that, again, logically show you, okay, so this is barely breaking even? Because you kind of have to go there before you can actually reach profitability. So anyway, wanted to get that out early because I imagine a lot of people might want to hear my thoughts on the whole Superman VOD sales thing. And ultimately, yeah, when you're a studio, when you're putting it out that early, it's a financial decision. And again, that tells us a lot about how this is not the big financial hit that a lot of people are trying to say that it is. And so let's go ahead now and dive into these numbers. And so Weapons dropping only 43%. So as a horror film especially, right, these are not the best numbers that we've ever seen. This is not like a Sinners or anything like that, right, which had insane drops. But 43%, even for a non-horror film, is pretty darn good. For a horror film, it's even better, right? Because a lot of times horror films have those audiences that will show up their opening weekends because they, again, there's that horror genre that gets a lot of people. It's the most consistent genre. It has the most consistent audience attendance, really, of any of the genres currently out there. And so having it drop like that, where it's obviously getting in more than just horror fans, is a very, very good sign, very healthy sign. And also, biggest thing of all for Warner Brothers and for this film, it's already profitable. This film is already making its profit back, and that was after having, again, a budget that is not the smallest in the world, but also not the largest in the world. And so, hey, maybe it turns out if you don't spend all that much money and you still make a story and you tell a movie, you have a movie that tells the story that is able to, thrill people just enough to get that word of mouth and to get people excited for it and to get people coming back again and again, and also to get new people out there, new audience members, which is what any film and any franchise, I imagine they're going to try to make more for this now, future franchise would want to have. Then guess what? This is how exactly you do it. This is the blueprint that you follow, right? Even after 2 weeks, it's now adding 248 screens as well. So the fact that it's adding screens and only dropping 43% is also a very good sign because, again, you're raising the number of screens, and so you would expect that drop off to maybe be a little bit higher because of the way that those things are going. But hey, this thing is going to easily reach $100 million domestically and is well on its way to being one of the big success stories of this year. Again, already profitable, likely get $100+ million in net profits by the end of its run, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Freakier Friday from Walt Disney. Again, this is actually a surprise, right? It had a pretty low opening weekend, right? I would say mediocre overall is what we can say for that opening weekend. And because it is now having actually a decent hold, 49%, as I said, for almost any film, dropping in the 50% or lower range is pretty good, right? For Weapons, it's even better because of the kind of movie that it is. This tells us, hey, guess what? Even though this film is definitely not the big winner that Disney was probably hoping for, they were probably expecting this thing to be a lot bigger than what it actually is. It's doing well enough, though, for them to say, you know what? We're going to make maybe a little bit of money back on this thing. And hey, that's a lot better than a lot of the other films they've had this year when you've had hundreds of millions of dollars worth of losses in this year alone. And of course, your massive success in Lilo and Stitch. This is the kind of number that you want to see. And this is the kind of experience that you want to see as well. Because, hey, if you're at least breaking even, making a small amount of profit, hey, at least you're not adding to your negatives for the year because it has been a rough year for Disney. So kudos to them for having a film that no one was really asking for still do well enough to make some money back, potentially. Nobody 2, as I said, really surprised here, $9.2 million. Just for comparison, the first film made about $6.7 million in its opening weekend back in 2021. Adjusting for inflation, that's about equivalent to about $8.7 or so million, 8.3 maybe. So you're talking about very marginally different numbers there. The big thing to me, though, is if you compare ticket sales, because some people get triggered by inflation for some reason. It's amazing how, inflation has triggered always a lot of people, but it wasn't until Superman came out and they had to defend that movie that all of a sudden a lot of people that may have previously not had issues with inflation now do. But if that even triggers you, well, guess what? Just looking at ticket sales, average ticket price back then was around $10.40. Average ticket today is roughly around $14 or more, depending on the movie. Guess what? If this film's $13 is your average ticket price, if that is the case, that's being very conservative, very generous. You're talking about maybe 100,000 more tickets. But if you put the more realistic $14, let alone $15, you drop all the way down to 600,000 tickets, which is about where you had audience-wise for your first movie. This is not a good opening for them domestically, and this is not a good look for Universal. And again, it's not the end-all be-all because $25 million is not a whole lot of money to spend. $75 million worth of a break-even point. Again, we'll see exactly how this film legs out, but not a great start for this film. I imagine they wanted this to be a lot higher, and not looking good so far. Fantastic Four continues to be a massive flop, finally dropping in the 40s, right? It dropped 67% in the first weekend, or second weekend. Third weekend dropped another 60%, so I guess they've stopped the bleeding. Still not doing well either, though. 44% drop there, so $247 million is where that film currently stands. Bad Guys 2, 29% hold there. It's actually a pretty good hold, so it's looking like this might do a little bit better down the line, but again, still not probably the number that they were looking for this film. It's not going to match the same success as the first movie did. Superman only dropped 34%, dropped out of 265 screens. This film's essentially done with its run. I mean, as I said, it's going to likely be able to still leg it out to 350. It's not going to make that much more than 350 though, now that it is available on video on demand, and now we again know why, and it's begun all financials. Naked Gun dropping 42% in its third weekend of release. Jurassic World Rebirth still holding on well with $332 million, 40%, dropping from 400 plus screens. Again, Jurassic World Rebirth is one of the biggest films of this year. And then F1 continuing to hold as well. 9% drop from last weekend. That's actually pretty impressive. You also had some re-releases of films like Shin Godzilla, so that got into the top 10, at least according to the current numbers. The film Together dropped 58%. Sketch from Angel Studios dropped a massive 62%. Can't say I'm all that surprised. It's been kind of the state of Angel Studios films most recently. And the numbers has had a lot of issues today, and so I'm lucky enough to get this chart up here. So some of these numbers might be updated. There might be some other films that are now being reported. But when I was starting the article for geeksandgamers.com that I do always before this video, I actually had to rely on a lot of other sites just to get the data in front of me. So actually look at that. It actually reloaded. I was able to pull up those numbers again. So again, not a whole lot of stuff added there or any difference. Weapons, $138 million in 2 weeks. Very, very good for this kind of movie. Again, for a horror film like this is definitely a huge win for them. So again, kudos to them for being able to have this movie and to make right now 3.6 times its budget. Again, that's also why we can confirm that this film has indeed made its money back. And for a rated R film, especially for a rated R horror film, this is a huge win. And so, again, kudos to everyone behind that. Freakier Friday, $70 million globally after 2 weekends. Again, not the biggest numbers in the world. This is not going to do anything compared to the first movie, but hey, it's doing well enough for its budget. Nobody 2, really not doing much of anything, unfortunately. As of the last update, there was no internationals, but the international total was pretty light according to some sites. I think around $4 million or so, $4 or $5 million maybe, give or take. So, again, not looking like this is going to be saved by that audience. Fantastic Four is around $450 million at this point in time. Again, still a massive flop because of its massive budget, which is going to be a lot higher based on, it's going to be a lot higher because of the fact it was shot in the United Kingdom. We know any budget that they tell us, in this case, they told us it was $200 million worth of a budget. We know, hey, when those actual results come out, when the actual tax data comes out, they're going to have spent at least $100+ million more on this, and that's after tax incentives. So, yeah, this is going to be another massive loss for Disney. Bad Guys 2, $101 million there. Again, just not going to do as well as the first film, but definitely doing better down the stretch. Superman, $592 million, so on the cusp of $600 million. And as I said, these numbers may not be the most up-to-date. So $600 million is definitely on the table. I said that was between $600 to $750 million. This film is not going to get anywhere close to $700 million, though, because of the fact, again, it's doing nothing internationally. It's slowing down way too much domestically. Studios saw that. That's why they put it on video on demand. He can try to make whatever, James Gunn can make whatever claim he wants about, it has to do with Peacemaker, but that argument is just complete nonsense, just from any logical point of view. You look at the financials for this, and you can clearly see, if you are actually using your rational brain and not just your fan brain, that this was a financial decision. And again, whether you're comparing this film to the previous, DCEU movies or anything else that came out this year alone, this is not as big of a film as people are saying it is, especially compared compared to its overall budget. Let's go over to my chart because we love charts on OMB Reviews. And so as you can see, we have some projections to make. So after 2 weekends, Weapons is at $138 million. That means that we can project the film will make somewhere between $197 to $276 million by the end of its run. That's just based off of where most films tend to perform after their first 2 weekends, right? So that's where the minimum maximum projections come. That's just following the historical standards there. Obviously, some films can do better, some films can do worse. Most films, though, fall within that range. Freakier Friday is expected to make around $100 million to $140 million globally by the end of its run. And the film's Sketch, again, Angel Studios release, and so harder to really get these things fully vetted, but this film might make between $10 and $14 million. I put in here a $3 million budget because I don't know how much they spent for the rights. Again, they did not make this movie. They just bought the distribution rights, so whatever costs that accrued for them, I imagine could not have been more than just a few $1,000,000. So if that is the case, indeed, this film is likely to make money back for them. That's kind of been the standard model for everything that Angel Studios has done. So again, not a huge win for them. They are still trying to find their Sound of Freedom 2, and that's just unfortunately not going to happen for them, it looks like, anytime soon. Freakier Friday's budget was $42 million. Weapons budget was estimated at $38 million. Nobody 2 at $25 million, which is why we are currently in the state that we are. So based off of those, we're projecting that Weapons will make between $61 and $108 million. In more realistic numbers, again, since the film has already made profit, we're probably talking at least $50 million in net profits, and I would say at most $100 million, if not more. I think there's a good argument to be made if the film continues to hold well, and right now there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of indication that it's slowing down, that this film will probably be able to reach close to $100 million in net profits by the end of its run. So it's doing very, very well domestically, and again, internationally, a lot smaller. Not surprised there, but because of how small the budget is, that separation between those two is not as important. And as you can see, what is the actual current loss or current gain? $11.5 million in net profits after 2 weekends. That's a huge win for a film, again, that didn't cost all that much money, but needed to be successful in order to make anything back. Freakier Friday is still $26 million in the red, but as I said, there is a chance for this film actually to make its money back. Right now, the range is between minus $2.9 million to up to $21 million. Average of that is around 9. So I wouldn't be surprised if this film barely breaks even. So we're talking just, again, minus $2 million or so by the end of its run, or maybe positive $2 to $8 million, maybe. Again, it's not really performing all that well. That was a pretty good hold. We'll see what week 3 and 4, especially as more and more films start to kind of enter into the fray. But as of right now, it's definitely a better story than it was previously. This is not the huge win, though, that I imagine Disney would have wanted for this, but at this point, they, I think, are going to take anything as a win with the massive losses that they have seen from a lot of their films from this past year. Some of the other numbers here that we can look to, as I said, Sketch right now we would say is not quite broken even yet, but again, take that with a grain of salt. The Bad Guys still $70 million in the red, so as I said, it's doing better down the stretch domestically, but it's just not likely to reach those same heights that the first film did. So we're probably looking at this film still ending its theatrical run in the red. Naked Gun looking at a similar situation. Again, not too much losses there. Fantastic Four still $150 million in the red, and again, that's being very conservative with those numbers. That is, again, assuming that budget that they've given us is actually correct, and I don't believe that budget for a second. It's also assuming the marketing budget that has also been put out there for this movie. So, yeah, we're talking about a film that probably, in realistic terms, is going to be $200+ million in the red when everything is said and done once we get those actual budgets coming in. I Know What You Did Last Summer is already profitable. It's adding to its profits now. Smurfs, still a loss there. Eddington, still a loss there. James Gunn Superman, right, even though it's close to $600 million, is still about $50 million in the red. Again, based off of more realistic numbers. And if you can see this, right, it's at currently, compared to its first 2 weeks, 68.8%. So this film is right now looking to probably end closer to 60%, which means average. So this film, as I said, is not really doing above average compared to its first 2 weeks. This film's opening weekend was already also not all that impressive. So the fact that they put it on VOD tells us everything that we really need to know about how this film is not the huge hit that people are saying it is. Again, it's not a massive catastrophe either, but when you are, again, setting up a whole new universe, and you have all that hype around this movie, and you have everything that's going for it right now, you would have expected that movie to do a lot better than it did, especially with the amount of money they put into it. It didn't do that. The fact that they were not able to make their money back is, I think, a huge deal. And the fact also that James Gunn has consistently now lied about various things has shown he is not making this confusion surrounding the DC universe any better, especially with the projects and being very coy and maybe misleading, maybe lying. Who knows when it comes to him? Is I think honestly doing a lot more damage to the brand and could potentially cost them quite a bit in the future, especially since the next thing that they have is a rated R show called Peacemaker, which apparently is going to explain the whole separation or difference between DCEU and DCU, right? He's very much talking about how you kind of need to see this in order for you to understand what the world's going to be going forward and the difference between what the world was previously. Again, take that for what it is, but it looks like a giant mess here, and the VOD, again, release, I think, helps just to confirm what many of us have been saying now for a very, very long time. And so those are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts? Let me know. Have you seen Nobody 2? What do you think about it? Again, I had some issues with it myself. I thought overall I enjoyed what it was. It was able to recapture a lot of the same beats from the first movie. That's also one of the issues, though, is that it didn't innovate nearly enough. But in the moments that it did innovate, sometimes it was done well, sometimes it was not done well. Sharon Stone in the movie I thought was terrible. Her acting was awful, and just the character itself was just unnecessary and really a waste of time. And a lot of the other things that were a part of this film, I think, really hurt it. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts about Nobody 2. So let me know your thoughts on Nobody 2 and Weapons and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, make sure you smash that like button and make sure you smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.